Now, let's just say we went through a 3-month project and we've developed an EVP for that 1,000 people company. So what does it mean now for the TA people? How do they then take full advantage of that EVP to use it throughout their communications across the different channels to attract the right people for those roles they're trying to fill?
Good question. So there's probably 2 or 3 levels to this. The first is how we attract the right people, and as important is how we assess these people. So the first step before we start going to communications is to establish the connection between employees and the values of the organisation. So often organisations have a set of values, and in my experience, they are one of about a dozen different. There are only a dozen sets of values in the world, and your organisation will be a variant of that dozen. So they'll generally talk about integrity and quality and community and all these lovely things.
Sure.
So we shy away from the word values because I think those values need parking, because very often companies forget what those values mean, and you ask an organisation what they mean and people go, I don't know, it's been up there.
Why?
It's been up there so long I don't even know what they mean. We did an exercise once where we asked the leadership team. We took all the values posters down in the building before we had the meeting. We asked the leadership team to name the 5 values of the organisation, and they couldn't. Because they've been up there for so long, they enter people's blind spots. And then when you ask them what do those values mean, and when was the last time you displayed one of these values, they just go completely silent. So in most organisations, sets of values are a laminated piece of A4 paper on the wall, and when you take them down, there's a bit of faded wallpaper behind it because they've been up for so long. So we take that and we say, okay, we don't know how attached you are to these values. So what we will do is talk to your employees about what they think the values of the organisation are. We're not saying we're going to implement this, but it would be interesting to ask them the same question. Okay. And what we do is we use the word or the term brand pillars rather than values, because people get offended. If you attack their values, people get offended. So we use brand pillars, and there are usually 5, 6 brand pillars. It might be transparency. It might be a sense of community. It might be assistance. It might be looking out for each other.
About a sense of building the best product.
Yeah, quality. But you generally find when people in the organisation talk about what they do, it's a lot clearer than when someone writes it as a value. Integrity. What does the word integrity mean? Who knows?
But why, when you're saying that all these nice things and stuff, why isn't it about making money or returning great return to our shareholders? I mean,
because most people don't realise their connection with that. Most people in an organisation have so many steps removed from them. We're not all in a customer service position where we can see and measure the effect of our performance and our day's work. So normally organisations cascade down this sense of community and brand pillars so that we each in the organisation treat someone else as a customer. Even if we're not in touch with an ultimate customer, we behave the same way as the front-facing staff do. So they feel supported, and we feel we have an idea of our sense of value in the organisation. If you just sit in a stock room and you have no connection to the output of your endeavours, it's impossible to feel valued. So these brand pillars and what they mean are really important. They're really important to an organisation. And the amount of times we've changed the values in an organisation because they're just irrelevant. They're not relevant anymore. People either don't understand what they mean, never did understand what they mean, or worse still, completely disagree with them and feel cornered or feel somewhat lied to, or if you ask them to explain these values, you say, "Well, I never believed in that value to start with." So our brand pillars are very important. They are the cornerstones of the organisation's behaviour. So if we can capture those, that becomes very powerful because we're playing back to people. How do you capture those? Through research. But
who decides that? The employees, the clients?
You ask them the right question, they'll tell you.
The consumers of the product, the board, the shareholder. Who?
If you have 1,000 people in the organisation that don't understand what they do, then they all need to leave. Just ask them what they do. You said, why don't we have your question was, why don't we all have a connection to the EBIT of the business, effectively? Shareholder value. Well, there are probably only 5 people in an organisation that really care about that, aren't there? the shareholders themselves and the CFO and the CEO and the COO and the people that are judged by shareholder values. Most other people aren't, unless you happen to be an investor. So if you run a publicly listed company, so the banks, for instance, all have huge challenges in that a candidate could also be an investor in the business. They could also be a customer of the business.
So give me an idea of 3 types of people, groups of people that you interview when you're building those brand pillars. I'm a little now unsure. Because there's so many stakeholders.
So when we start the EVP project, the first question we ask is, who should we be talking to? Who should we be talking to in the organisation? That is invariably people you trust and people that you are fearful of being disengaged. That's normally who the organisation wants us to talk to.
Okay.
You want to talk to both ends. Yeah, you want to talk to both ends. You want to talk to the people who are absolutely have a rusted on badge with you, and those people who are slightly mysterious and disengaged because they're flight risks and we want to find out how to engage them. So when you start talking to people, they will tell you, if you ask open questions and you assure them of anonymity and assure them that there will be no impact of this on their employment.
Give us a couple of examples of brand pillars that you've come across that, surface a lot.
It varies depending on what industry you're in. So if you're in heavy industry, then safety could be a huge brand pillar.
You started to make a lot of sense now. Okay.
So look, I don't care. Just send me home with all my fingers and toes intact, and remove the sense of danger in the organisation, and I'll love you for it. And I will look out for my mates. I will look out for everyone else too. It becomes a brand, but it becomes part of what you do. We would not operate if it's not in a safe manner.
Okay.
HSE can be the core element of an EVP in heavy industries, in large organisations. If you have a better HSE policy than your competitors, in other words, you keep people safer and you reassure them and their family that they're going to come home to their husband and wife and kids at the end of the day.
Mike, even for someone like me who's never worked in any heavy industry or anything that you're required to lift more than 1 kilo, I would respect a company that emphasises so much on safety, and they are in that industry. I don't know, tyre company, engine building company, mechanics, whatever. If there's that great emphasis in their brand, even when they're advertising the product in any kind of comms, if they talk about safety, somehow you have a great deal of respect for them indirectly in your brain. I really appreciate what you're saying. I see it.
It may not be the single thing that makes someone join you or want to join you, but it is an extremely reassuring thing that you have their welfare at heart. It makes them feel better about you and your intentions towards them, which is what building brands is all about. Do I feel good being associated with this product, service, or employer? So the brand pillars that we capture then give us some clues as to the sort of information and communications that we need to make. So a brand pillar of safety will mean something very different to a CFO working in an office environment where the most dangerous thing is the pencil sharpener, to someone operating heavy equipment or digging up thousands of tons of iron ore every day. So the messaging around that particular brand pillar may have 10 different applications depending on your position within the organisation. Safety, for instance, is probably the hardest to communicate to contingent workforces because they haven't grown. It hasn't become part of their everyday routine. But it can also be a very strong EVP for contingent workers. If you make sure from day one they are safe on site and secure, that can make the difference between which contract they accept from you or your competitor. So once we've got the brand pillars established, and they may vary from your own values, and you have to be ready to have that discussion and possibly argument with your leadership team, because the chances are someone on your leadership team wrote those values 20 years ago. Without any research, because it was just a figment of their opinion, and they've never been questioned to this day. And suddenly you're questioning them, not only questioning them, but you're questioning them with evidence that they are slightly irrelevant, and you will find you'll have a very upset person in the room, and maybe more than one. So we have to do this with evidential research. It can't just be an opinion. But if we can have that discussion, have that argument, and win it, we have a far better chance of engaging the rest of the workforce than the 2 people or 1 person that wrote the values.
How do they start to reap the benefits of that? Take these assets or developing assets for what they need to do their job out of that EVP. Give us some tangible example or something explained to us.
Okay, I'll go through 10 seconds of methodology first. So the brand pillars and the communications against that will give us what we call a message matrix. So it looks like a big spreadsheet, but it'll be 5 or 6 brand pillars and then perhaps the 10 different cohorts and groups of people who have to engage with each of those pillars. And each one will be slightly different. So you'll end up with 60 boxes of words that are all different but sell a similar concept. So how do we sell safety to a CFO? How do we sell safety to a junior site operator? So this then starts populating our recruitment ads. Yeah, we then can start writing recruitment ads.
Depending on the role you're saying, we explain them differently.
Yeah, and we can write these recruitment ads without actually having a position description in front of us because it applies to the organisation, not to the position we're hiring or the role we're hiring. So we can have all this work done beforehand, before you even think about going and recruiting. This is the equivalent, and you brought up the army analogy earlier. This is polishing your guns and getting your bullets sorted out and getting all of the equipment before the war starts. It just makes plain sense. Yeah. Get all this work done.
Got it.
So you don't have to sit down and write a recruitment ad in 20 minutes because someone's about to leave or you're going to be without a person in 2 days. So all this work then goes into an employer brand guideline book that governs how our job board ads look, how our internal comms look, how our social media content works, how our Facebook page appears, how our LinkedIn strategy works. It informs every piece of the strategy.